The Couture 303 podcast is now officially sponsored by Dapper Turkish Barbers in Hunts Cross. You can find them on Wood End Avenue and they do the full service there. The hair, the beard, the ears, the nose, the cutthroat, hot towels, the lot. It's the only barbers I ever go to. Fantastic service, great lads. No need to book, just pop in and see them 7 days a week. If you want a nice sick fade like mine, you will not be disappointed. The absolute best in the area. That's Dapper Turkish Barbers, Wood End Avenue, Hunts Cross. And now back to the show.
The Couture 303 podcast with Jay Viper.
Welcome back, guys, to a very, very special episode of the Couture 303 podcast. My guest today is arguably my most requested and most anticipated guest today. He is a DMC, European and UK champion. He's beloved in Merseyside, Northern Ireland and other places as well. I am talking, of course, by the one and only DJ Trikk. Here he is. How are you, Mike?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good morning. First of all, mate, thank you so much for doing this. I know you're not a big fan of doing these kind of things, so it makes it even more special. And as I said at the start of the show, you are easily my most requested guest to date. Lots of people have been asking for you in the past. You're a bit of an enigma, so it really is a scoop to get this. So first off, thanks very much for doing this, mate. Really appreciate it.
It's no problem. I know you've been asking me for quite a while, and it's just been.
You can say I've been a fucking pest, Mike. It's okay.
No, you haven't been a pest. I must admit, you've been very subtle. So it's.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah. It's all good.
So as we always do, Mike, we start at the very beginning. So the first question I ask everybody is, where and when were you born?
I was born in 1968, and I pretty much grew up on the Wirral in a village called Heswell. I'm still there. I'm living here now as well. I've moved away over the years, but I'm from Heswell. Same place as Glen Cyanide, so don't be fooled.
So we'll get to that in a bit, yeah. So
don't be fooled by the.
it wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't talk about Glen. So what was your family unit like? Both parents, brothers and sisters, stuff like that?
I've got a sister, and obviously my parents. My mum's passed away a few years ago now, but it's just I kept myself to myself, to be fair, and just went out and played with my friends and stuff. But Heswell's a nice place to grow up, so I was out on my bike a lot and skateboarding, and there's a lot of going out and hanging around with friends around the place. Yeah.
Is your sister older or younger?
She's older than me. Yeah.
Okay, so growing up, then obviously we'll get to your various hobbies and outlets in a minute. But so from a musical perspective, where did you? When were you first introduced to music? And I'm sure it normally comes from family members, doesn't it? Parents or older siblings or cousins, uncles, whatever. So what was your first introduction to music in general?
None of my family influenced my music. My sister was into things like the Bay City Rollers, and it wasn't my thing. My mum's Irish, so there was a lot of Irish music going on, and again, it wasn't my thing either. I was just influenced by hearing anything electronic or anything different or anything a bit unusual. So I didn't have any influences as such from people around me, but I found some things kind of twanged my ears, and I got into listening to that kind of stuff. I like punk when that punk was around. Obviously, I'm old enough to remember all that, mainly because it was just so extreme and different, I like things that stood out and wasn't the norm.
It was exciting as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I was brought up, so it was Duran and Flock of Seagulls and Howard Jones and Gary Newman, anything where there was synthesizers and drum machines and anything like that involved. I kind of swayed.
So you were at your teenage years when that was all kicking off, like the electronic sounds and the disco and the new wave and all that kind of stuff. So where I mean, I'm assuming it was like the Top of the Pops and stuff like that.
Yeah, listening to the radio. I used to do the obvious stuff where you were making your mixtapes by pressing the pause button and hoping that the presenter doesn't start speaking. So it was radio years ago. I used to be heavily into electronics, so I used to make crystal radios and just listen to them, or get an old radio from somewhere. I used to listen to, I think it was a Stew Pot on a Saturday morning. I think we're going back a bit here.
I'm a little bit younger than you. I was born in 75.
Oh, you're a kid.
But obviously my mum was quite young when she had me, so she was into the Bay City Rollers and See, like Sweet and Mud and Gary Glitter. I know Gary Glitter's a bit of a bit of a dodgy one to talk about these days, but back then, you know, big deal, Slade and stuff like that. So you said you were going out on your bike. So a lot of DJs, and so for anyone who hasn't seen or listened to it, you did a podcast with Malorka Lee, the late great Malorka Lee. And I certainly gained a lot of information from that. And his podcast. So if anyone's watching this, if you haven't listened to that, when you finish this, go back and listen to that. It's a fabulous podcast. Quite sad now, obviously, because he's passed away as well. But you touched on that about a lot of people in the scene. They come from the skateboard scene, the bike scene, the breakdancing scene, the graffiti scene. So what was your kind of start in that kind of genre, like that kind of scene, if you like?
Well, skateboarding was the first thing that we got over here. I mean, my father got me a plank of wood and we took a roller skate to pieces. That was my first, I think it was everyone's first skateboard, really. And then I really got into my BMX. I was rattle on about it, but I had a Harrow Freestyler. I was fortunate enough to meet Bob Harrow this year in LA, completely out of the blue. He's a bit of a hero of mine. He's one of the BMX riders in the film E.T., the guy with the balaclava on. So, but obviously, Bob Harrow was like a big influence on the whole BMX scene. He's started freestyle off. So I had a Harrow Freestyler, which I kind of doted on. But then hip hop arrived and house music arrived. So anything that was new and cool and a bit left of center, I kind of was, I swayed towards anything like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned hip hop there, and obviously for those who don't know, I'm sure most people who watch this will. Before you were a club DJ, you were heavily involved in the DMC side of things, and you won a number of championships as well. So obviously, when hip hop came about as a genre of music, what was your first introduction to that, and what was the turning point where you thought, I want to have a little go at this?
Malcolm McLaren's Buffalo Gals, the video of that, I think was the turning point for the majority of people that got into hip hop. Unless you were living over in the States, but anywhere outside of that, it was the first introduction to hip hop. And obviously within that video, it shows scratching, breakdancing, graffiti, pretty much all the elements that makes hip hop up. And that era, I just wanted to spin on my back, spray my wall, and scratch records. It was everything to do with it, the style, the fashion. Again, it was just something that was so different that a lot of people kind of loved it. I was also, one thing that was pretty cool was we kind of looked at Malcolm McLaren as being this real big influence, because obviously we were just saying there about the punk scene and him being the Svengali behind the Sex Pistols. Some years later, I got to work for him, and it was quite a surreal experience working for Malcolm McLaren when he's kind of like a bit of a hero to you, what he's done. And
I can relate to that. I'm sat here now in my kitchen talking to DJ Trikk, so I know exactly how you feel, mate.
No, nowhere near Malcolm McLaren, but
don't knock it, mate. So was it the breakdancing, or was it the DJing that came first?
It was breakdancing first, because obviously there's a bit of a financial outlay to DJing.
Yeah.
The only outlay you had on breakdancing was you going to go
lino.
It was a piece of lino which or you're going through the knees of your jeans or something. There wasn't really much, but I like body popping. I like that. I wasn't particularly very good at breakdancing, but I enjoyed it, and it was one of those things that everyone was doing at that time, I think.
Yeah, and you weren't alone. You're with another bit of a Liverpool icon. You used to do a lot of stuff with Dave the Wave, who a lot of people who watch this show will know as Davey T.
Yeah, Dave was, first of all, we used to, when we were breakdancing in Liverpool, behind St. John's Market, there was like a bit of a flyover. I think it's actually still there. And underneath that, there was a stage. They had like a raised stage, and that's where everybody went to watch breakdancing. On a Saturday morning, it was absolutely heaving with breakdancers and poppers and everything. We'd all go down there, and Dave was one of the people I got to meet. And Dave was also the first person to show me how to scratch records. He had a pair of decks at home, and he was him that kind of introduced me to So that side of it. He's a very talented lad, Dave. One of the things he was doing around that time was he started chopping up stuff using tape machines. But what he'd done is he'd taken Paul Hardcastle's 19, and it was the time of the Toxteth riots, and he'd taken news reports from Radio City and Radio Merseyside and chopped them up so they were the vocals.
Wow.
He replaced the vocals of Paul Hardcastle's 19 with vocals and clips about the Toxteth riots. Nothing came of it, unfortunately, but as an actual idea, it was absolutely brilliant.
That's remixing.
Yeah,
in its most fun, in most rudimental stage, I think, you know.
Yeah, he's a clever guy, and I know he's doing a night that I'd love to go to now, which is kind of all soul and funk, and for a slightly older crowd. He's always got his finger on the pulse, Dave.
Yeah, he's moved with the times massively, and
yeah.
I happened to I had Dave on the podcast. He actually came here and recorded here.
Yeah,
and I said to him, and I was dead honest and open with him. I said, I always thought you were a bit of a prick, Dave. I said, I'm being honest. I said, because you always came across like a bit standoffish. Yeah. But when I actually met him when he came here, I was happy to say he's not that guy at all. He's a fucking really nice guy. You know, genuinely nice, down to earth, helpful, so knowledgeable, so talented as well.
Yeah. No, he's a good guy. I think there's a lot of us kind of when some people see you, they find you to be a bit standoffish, but it's very. You know, when you're meeting somebody that you don't know, but they have all this kind of thoughts about you and memories of what you've done. It's a bit of an odd one to deal with. So
of course, I mean, again, we've had this, you know, with yourself. I remember going to Drome 94, 95, and you were on this stage, and we had the tapes and the posters and all that kind of stuff. And it is a little bit like, well, I know who you are. You should know who I am. And obviously you don't know who I am. I'm just a face in the crowd. So when I come over, all right, Mike, you know, like I know you. You're like, the fuck's this guy?
Well, I get that a lot. And I was doing a gig in Ireland last weekend, and the guy, the promoter that got me over there, had come to a club. It was in Warren Point, a place called Warren Point. And I'd done a couple of gigs in this club in Warren Point, and the one that he attended was the New Year's Eve in '97. And obviously he'd had a really good night there, and he was the same. He kind of knew the ins and outs. But you're having people asking you, "Do you remember me from 27 years ago? You played this track, and you met my girlfriend, or you met this one?" And I remember some of them. There's a lot of the crowd over in Northern Ireland that I know. They've just been there forever. You know, they're just a really good bunch. And but yeah, meeting people is a bit.
It's repetition as well, and obviously, if you meet someone once, like I say, they've got you on tape covers and CD covers and posters and stuff, and you meet them once, and they think they're going to remember you. Obviously, they're not going to. So the breakdancing thing, did anything ever come of that? Did you ever do any competitions in that?
No, nothing like that. Not breakdancing or body popping. I just enjoyed it. Like I say, I used to go busking with Dave in Liverpool, so we'd be on Church Street and we'd do that.
Some videos on YouTube, actually.
Hey, well, you won't see me on there, fortunately. But Dave, I mean, he was really good at what he did, and like I say, he's a real showman, Dave. Really
he
good.
is, and he always has been, and he's always been at the forefront, and he's got a bit of a Midas touch as well, hasn't he? So when did it go from, obviously, the whole as you alluded to there, the hip hop scene? It's full of little factions. You've got the graffiti side of things, you've got the DJ side of things, the breakdancing side of things. At what point did you think, okay, and you've touched on the financial outlay there, it's not cheap to buy a set of decks. You know, nowadays you can go to Argos and buy a DJ controller for 200 quid and do what you would have spent, you know, a $1.5 grand on back in the 80s or 90s. So obviously Dave introduced you to the DJing side of things. At what point did you go, okay, I'm going to have a go at this?
Not far after then. I bought a pair of they're called Fisher turntables. Not Fisher
Price.
It's a brand called Fisher, and they were just normal hi-fi turntables. But I had two of them, and I bought a Phonic MRT60 mixer, and it got me going. I could mix on them just about. I could definitely scratch. I took the rubber platters off and put paper on them so I could scratch on them, and they were a good starting block to learn on. I obviously always aspired to have a pair of Technics 1200s, and eventually I was actually working at a hi-fi shop and got a decent price on them, and got a new pair of Technics 1200s, and the change up to that was brilliant. Excuse me. I kind of knew what a Technics would feel like when I got on it, and they did exactly what you know what they're supposed to do. They had a lot of torque.
I think if you can mix and scratch on a shitty, let's say a shitty deck, you can, you know, once you get on Technics, obviously you've got to get used to the difference in the torque. That was the big shock for me. So I Technics were my first ever decks.
Okay.
And I had friends who'd come round who had like Pro 150s and stuff like that. And they were like, oh, your decks are shit. They're not. They're the best decks you can get. It's just that you're not used to it. That torque, it feels like it's going to rip your hand off, doesn't it, when you first get on Technics?
Yeah. That's what you want, really. Is
of course, yeah. So where were you getting your records from? Because obviously, you know, with record shops, I mean, obviously record shops been around for a long, long time, but you know, the style of music you were playing, the hip hop and stuff, you must have been selective record shops.
Yeah. Well, I did. I would always go looking for unusual breaks and old records, and I used to shop a lot in Probe in Liverpool. I used to get served by Pete Burns from Dead or Alive, and he was
Before the Lips.
He was a brilliant character in there. He scared me to death for the first couple of months of going in there. But I don't know if you've ever seen the film High Fidelity with Jack Black in, and Jack Black's character is in a record shop, an old, like a collectible record shop, and you'd have people coming in saying, I'd like to buy this, and Jack Black's character was saying, you don't want that, it's absolute crap. And that's what Pete Burns used to do with me. So I'd give him a pile of records, and he'd be, as he was putting them in the till, he'd be saying, that's crap, that's rubbish, what are you doing buying this? It was just, he was a proper kind of bitch kind of.
Yeah. You surprised me.
Yeah. I kind of met up with him years later. I don't know if you recall, there was a time when I had red contact lenses.
Yes, I remember very well.
Well, it was Pete Burns that put me in touch with the optician that did them. I met Pete down at a publisher's hoo-ha meeting down in London. He was down there with a crowd of other people I knew, and I started chatting to him and reminded him that I was the person he used to abuse. I was buying records. And I was saying I do a lot of these kind of raves now, and going over to Europe and seeing people with pink hair and all this kind of craziness. And said I'd really love to get red eyes. And he reminded me he had these, I don't know if you've seen the album cover, he's got black eyes.
That's right, yeah.
And they were like half a ping pong ball that he used to slip onto his eyeball.
Yeah, called sclera contact lenses, man. They cover they cover the white of your eye as well.
Yeah, well, that's what he had. But he put me in touch with the optician that made them for him, who was actually based in Hamilton Square in Birkenhead. And yeah, so there's a nice little Pete Burns story. But yeah, record shopping was. So
you got your contact lenses from round the corner from the Drome.
From yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But
top of knowledge here, guys.
I'd buy records from there. And then got in touch with Kev Edwards at Hot Wax in Newton Le Willows. Kev was brilliant. I used to send Kev postal orders just of however much I had, and just said, okay, send me some music. And I knew some of what I wanted, but a lot of the time he just knew. He was one of those people that knew what I was into, and he just sent me another package. And yeah, so there wasn't any record shop selling what I wanted in Liverpool, other than the old kind of, if I went searching for old breaks or unusual kind of bits of music with vocals onto scratch, I'd get them in Probe, or HMV was an obvious one, but
yeah,
it was just run of the mill stuff, you know.
Yeah.
But Hot Wax was my first kind of proper record shop to be buying from.
Yeah. So when did you discover the DMC and that side of things? Obviously, it's all kind of hip hop related, and it's been going for a very long time. But there was a kind of turning point where, you know, I mean, I watched some of your videos of the day when you were in the DMC, and apart from, there's a German guy called DJ David.
Yeah.
I think he was around the same time as you, around about the 90.
Yeah.
Apart from him, I don't think I've ever seen hand speed like yours before, because you and that's where the body popping kind of thing. I was showing my missus last night. She sat on the couch. I said, "Look at this." I said, look how next, because I was looking back to refresh my memory. I said, look how next level Trix was back in the day. And you were a hand under the leg and behind the back. And at one point you scratch where you've got your shoes off, scratch with your sock, and then you scratch with your mouth and stuff like that.
It was novelties at those times. So my friend Hutchie from up in Leeds used to come out with bikes, scratch with the tire off the bike. It was all those different kind of things, but obviously there was a lot less of me then, so it was easy.
Yeah, don't expect to see none of that on October the 12th. No.
Well, I might fall over and then it's difficult to get back up.
It brings a new meaning to the word breakdancing, that I suppose, doesn't it? So how did you discover the DMC then?
It was I used to buy a record mirror, and in there James Hamilton was kind of like a guy who'd do the dance section, so he'd be reviewing new music and nights and whatever else, and obviously there was always a little portion about the DMC competitions, and obviously I seen that and thought, oh, let's have a go. And I went up to Manchester to see a heat in Manchester. When I first started doing the competitions, it was still the easiest way to do it was disco mix club, so it was more about clubby stuff. It wasn't full on scratching. There was always a bit of scratching started to come into it when I was doing it, but it had been born from disco mixing, so blending music and nothing too technical. From there on in, it slowly changed. And I think the change was when they rebranded and called themselves just DMC, was when it really kind of took off as more of a hip hop, a specialist turntablist thing instead of this whole club kind of mixing that they
because I did notice on one of your videos, I'm not sure if it was 89 or 90, but you actually did a mix. You had two tunes actually mixing together. You just kind of stood back and let it mix, and you don't really see that these days now, do you? It's all about skills and tricks.
Well, the good thing is if you can use music that people can relate to, that's one of the really good things in scratch mixing. There's a local DJ called Rasp who's brilliant.
Yes, Manchester.
And one of the cool things about Rasp is he uses recognizable music. So a lot of it nowadays, when these guys are doing stuff, it's so technically advanced that unless you know the music that you're listening to, you half the time you don't actually know what they're doing. Yeah. You don't know whether it's part of the track. So if he uses a well-known track, the whole, everyone that's in there can understand what he's doing because it's a relatable piece of music. So sometimes it's good to play something that people can relate to and understand. You obviously get the chin scratchers who will be, looking in and looking for the finer details. But at the end of the day, you're there to entertain everyone in the venue and not just the technically minded ones,
Yeah, that's the thing with the DMC stuff. I've seen I had a couple of VHS tapes back in the day. I think it was the one where DJ David was on. This is before I even knew you existed. Didn't know who you were. And I think it might have been 1991 World Championships. Yeah. And the one thing I would say is, not being from a hip hop background, sometimes it did just sound quite cluttered and muddy because it got too much skill based, and like you say, there's no familiarity there. You can't really see you can see the hand movements and you can see how quick they're juggling the tracks, and like I say, the hand speed I seen out of you in them competitions was mind blowing. But sometimes it can sound a little bit confusing because you don't know what the track is, I suppose.
Yeah, and also we're dealing with real vinyl and stylus here, so they hop about, now and then. So it can be a bit messy. Obviously nowadays we've got DVS, so the kind of needle hopping stuff doesn't happen, and we're able to get really kind of cool sets because of that. So it was always it was the proverbial kind of spinning plates. You were really on the edge. Your tiny little stylus was between you and disaster kind of thing. So it was trying to keep light-handed on the turntables whilst you were most probably quite nervous and getting into it. So it's
So what was your first competition that you entered then?
I entered crumbs. I think I entered in Leeds against a mate of mine, Dave Hutchinson, DJ Hutchie, and I came second to him in that competition. That was the first one I went into. I was very nervous.
So was that just a UK heat, was it?
It was a UK heat, yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I've never actually won a UK championship. I've been in the finals, and I've got a second and a third. But yeah, that was the first one. I did various other ones. We did one in Liverpool, which I won, which was actually in the state.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, there was one in Liverpool.
How'd you become the European champion then if you're not the UK champion? How's that work?
Yeah, so what was happening was it was kind of an era where a DMC was constantly being won by the World Championship was constantly being won by an American. And I think they just thought, there's a World Championship, so well, let's have a European. And it's just,
right, okay.
I more than likely for financial reasons, but also it was really cool thing to do. And what they did was anyone who'd been a finalist in their country in Europe, excuse me for a second, anyone that was a finalist within a European country was then eligible to go for the European Championship. So there was me, Leaky Fresh from Manchester. It was anyone. So we were all over there. We went to Mallorca, and it was held in the BCM. It was actually the opening year of BCM. It was a brand spanking new club. It was pretty incredible. It's not like, I mean, it's a rave now, isn't it? But at the time, it was full of Italians, all amazing suits, and it was a proper nightclub. And
Miami Vice.
Yeah, it was. It looked like that. But so we did these competitions in there, and obviously I battled through and won. I mean, there were some really cool guys in there. DJ Pogo was one of my main competitions, but Francisco Zapala was in it. Soul Shock was in it. There was a lot of heavy hitters when in that scene.
I didn't know Carl Cox and Slipmatt both went into the DMC as well. I when I did the podcast with Slipmatt, and he mentioned it. Like, obviously, you don't associate Slipmatt or Carl Cox with that style of DJing at all. Like, so I was a bit of a shock.
But you see, Carl was, like I say, from that era where it wasn't pure scratching. It was disco mixing. It was mixing music, and so he was.
So you won the European Championships. That 1989, was it?
That was 1989, yeah.
Yeah. So what happened after that? Obviously, you're the European champion of the DMC. What does that affect? How does that affect your status? Because I know you did some tours with some pretty high-profile artists.
Yeah, well, we as soon as you kind of become the European champion, we then toured every European country. So for the first year or so, that's all I did. So we'd do a tour of France, and then one of Italy and Germany, and we'd go back and do France again. France was a really cool place, and Switzerland. And I was very fortunate to see an awful lot of the world doing that. It was brilliant. I remember in the weeks before, I was doing mixtapes with my friends and doing the odd little club gig here and there. Next thing you know, I'm getting flown all over the place.
Shots of stardom.
It was, and it was also at that time where DJs as a thing were becoming these, well, you wouldn't say superstars, but becoming more of a kind of a household name. It was something. It wasn't like you were a musician, so to speak. And
what kind of artists did you tour with then?
Oh, we did all kinds of stuff. We did shows with Adiva, Bros. There was times where I did some performances with Public Enemy. Then we did shows with Professor Griff and the Last Asiatic Disciples from Public Enemy. But there was everyone. We would, a lot of the times you'd be on a festival or something that had all these different names on. So at the time it's like Sydney Youngblood. I'm trying to think of the Snap.
Yeah.
2 Unlimited. There was all these people that you were kind of.
Yeah. How do you practice on when you're touring like that? How do you practice? Did they have a setup for you, or did you have to take your own turntables? Or
I didn't need to practice. I knew what I was doing. So
wow, that's quite a bold statement, isn't it?
Well, I've done an awful lot of practicing before.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So you ended up getting a sponsorship or an endorsement with Vestax. How did that come about? Because I remember seeing in a magazine there was the DJ Trikk mixer.
Yeah.
That you kind of helped design.
Yeah. So I came back from winning the DMC thing, and I thought I'm Billy Big Balls here. I'm important. And I rang up Vestax. They just started. The company had just started. They come from a guitar pedal company called Vestafire, and they decided to branch out. And So I rang up the manager of Vestax Europe, who's a guy called Rob Peck, and his engineer at the time was a guy called Toshi Nakayama, who ended up being the president of Vestax. But they've just literally started it was like an old Air Force base down in Surrey. And I rang up and said, I'm the European champion. Do you want to sponsor me? and Rob just said, no, we don't want to sponsor you. I was a bit disappointed.
Gee,
said, well, I'm after this little mixer you've got. They had a mixer called a PMC 05 Mark II, and it was about this size. But
the short crossfader.
And it had this, it was a 25mm throw crossfader. And at the time we were doing fast deck to deck, and that's all we needed. We needed a switch, to be honest with you. So I seen this mixer and I said, I really want it. And he says, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll send you the mixer. If you review it as the European champion, you can have the mixer. Brilliant. And so I did. And I gave an honest review. There was certain elements of the mix that were absolutely perfect for us. And certain elements, there was room for improvement. That were dreadful. You know, the input faders were skew whiff over here. They were really long throw compared to the crossfader. There was rubber pads on it that wrecked your knuckles.
That's the last thing you need, isn't it?
Yeah. So he was made up and he says, okay, well, do you want to come and do some demo stuff for us? So same time I was touring for DMC, I then started doing tours for Vestax, and they were taking me over to Asia and Japan and over to the States and stuff to show off their equipment. Yeah, but the mixer I designed was made from that original mixer I was with, and I just thought if I can move everything about, that would do. So I drew the mixer that I wanted from all of the dimensions that were on the original 05, and gave it to Rob Peck, and I actually put my signature on it, but being cheeky, and just did it as a whole design.
He kept it on, didn't he?
Including the V, and I thought nothing of it. And I think it was about 3 or 4 months later, we were doing a trade show in Orlando, and Rob says to me, "Mr. Shino's here, who's the owner of the company. He's got something for you. Just if you nip up to his room." So, if you know Japanese people, if they come to visit you, they'll bring you a present.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. It could be some Kit Kats, or it could be something, whatever it is. It's always a gift.
Yeah, I'll take the Kit Kats.
Some of them from Japan are pretty special. So anyway, I go up to the room, and there's Mr. Shino. And the other thing that the Vestax staff would also do is their suitcase would be half full of clothes and half full of spare parts and components that they would be bringing. So he pulls out this box, and it was the PMC 05 box, the original box, but stamped on it in like a little one of these kind of rubber stamps was a T. I didn't realize until I opened it, and I was absolutely gobsmacked that the mixer that I drew on the kitchen table at home was literally in front of me. It's pretty mind-blowing, to be honest.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's the first ever designed, endorsed, signatured DJ mixer out there. And it was the start of the PMC 05 series, which obviously is synonymous with scratch DJs.
Yeah, I had a PMC 05. It was quite a big mixer, but I always remember it was the first mixer I had, which had, if I'm right, because we're going back to like mid-90s now, it was the first mixer that I ever had that had bass, mid, and treble and gain.
Yeah.
I had the LED peak meters, a very short crossfader, and I had the trigger switches, which again were good for doing like little scratches on, because you could use the triggers instead of as you said before.
Yeah.
Ideally for scratching, you want a trigger rather than a crossfader to make the shortest transition from A to B.
Yeah.
Don't forget, you can catch me each and every Thursday night for my show, Absolute Oldskool, only on In-Demand Radio, where I play you 2 hours of classics and a feast of forgotten gems, usually on the harder side of the spectrum. We kick off with the early 90s every week, and then we have the trance flashback section, followed by the spotlight section. In the past, we've featured clubs and events like Kinetic, The Drome, Good Grief, labels like Tidy Tracks, Bonsai and Shock, and artists such as Ultrasonic, Tony DeVee and Scott Brown. We always finish off nice and tough with the Go Hard or Go Home section. You can catch it on In Demand Radio Thursday nights from 11 p.m. or listen back absolutely free of charge on indemandradio.com or download the free In Demand Radio app for Apple or Android. So, at what point then, when you're touring with the DMC, when was the transition? Because I know you played a lot of stuff in New Brighton and stuff like that with the likes of Steve Cocky.
Yeah.
When did you, was it a monetary thing? Did you think I could get some money from doing club gigs and stuff like that?
It was, I suppose, it's a bit of both. At the time when hip hop was, I was getting into that. I was also buying house music. So from about 85, I again intrigued by anything with a drum machine and synths and anything unusual. There's this house music had come out, and so I started buying that and playing about with that. And when you're not the champion anymore, when I kind of wasn't the champion, you obviously didn't get as many tours. So I was still doing some stuff. And I've thought, well, I actually like playing. I actually like traditional DJing as well. You know, I play music to people, not just doing these scratch mixing demos. Yeah. You're on for 5-10 minutes and then you're off. I really enjoyed taking people on journeys, you know, and playing music. So I kind of started putting myself out there doing that. And yeah, I mean, Steve Laycock and his family owned RJ's in New Brighton. So I used to do a Sunday night in there. I was doing it pretty much anywhere on the Wirral and around Liverpool, even playing Planet X in Liverpool, which was the kind of punk club at the time. Anywhere that would kind of have you at that time playing that music, it was a bit different and obviously looked upon as some kind of drug-related thing. So yeah, it was kind of hand in hand. But obviously, if I was getting gigs doing scratch mixing, off I would go. And if somebody wanted to play me to play house music, I was equally as kind of interested. So
I know you shared a flat with them. Obviously, everyone knows him as Steve Cocky, but Steve Laycock, you actually shared a flat with him, which, if I'm right in saying that it was Gary's house, Gary's flat.
Yeah. Well, I originally moved in with Bry Laycock, which is Cocky's one of Cocky's older brothers. And me and Bry lived in a flat in New Brighton. It's mainly because I was going away still. I was flying away, and there's no point in me having somewhere. I just needed a base.
Yeah, somewhere to crash.
Yeah, and so I shared a flat with Bry, and then Bry says, Gary's got a bigger flat in Liskeard. It was a bit tatty compared to where we were. We had this really swanky place with, it was brand new. But we went into Gary's flat and just thought it was bigger. It was cheaper. And Steve moved into one of the rooms there. So
he was only young as well, wasn't he? It was his first venture out the house, so to speak.
Yeah. But I've never, because I started DJing in RJ's years before. I knew Steve when he was, I don't know, he must have been 14 or 15. He came in. He used to have a big, stupid flick of hair. Have you seen the cartoon, The Fat Slags on Viz? The one that's got that. And I promise you, that's what Steve. And the funny thing was when he eventually got his hair cut short, for months later, he was still
wearing it back.
Yeah, so kind of all of the Laycock family and everyone involved with RJ's, as Mike Ebden and even the Dorf team were there. It's just a lovely bunch of people, and I've they're kind of like my, your secondary family, so to speak.
Yeah,
lovely bunch of people. A lot of time for them.
Yeah. So how did you meet Glenn? Obviously, we're moving towards you going to the Drome.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Glenn? And did you ever go to the Drome before you played, or was it something you were aware of? How did it come about?
Glenn, like I said before, is from Heswell. So don't, when you, like I say, when you see him being all hip hop and coming out of the ghetto, he's not. He's from Heswell. Really posh.
He's an imposter.
He used to kind of come round to my house and knock on the door, and he'd come up and just watch me practicing and stuff. And then we used to do kids' discos locally with a couple of friends of mine, and Glenn would always be around. He was obviously somebody that was interested in something to do with the music. It intrigued him. He loved his hip hop. But yeah, he's from here, and I've known him since he was a little kid. And
So obviously he started in the, he basically asked Dave Graham, could he have a go with the mic?
Yeah.
But we're probably talk, because at the time you had John Cotton. John Cotton was the MC, MC JC.
Yeah.
And a lot of people still hold a lot of love for John. Obviously, he's moved on now and he's DJing, and he's still DJing to this day. And he's well loved in the scene. I don't think MCing was a strong point, but I honestly believe there's still a lot of people out there who you know, look back at it with a lot of fondness. So Glenn probably seen a bit of a gap in the market.
Yeah.
And thought, well, I like hip hop. I'll do a bit of rapping when I'm in the shower or whatever, you know, it's being all gangster in Heswell. So obviously he introduced himself to Dave and said, you know, can I have a go with the mic, which he did. So how did you get involved? Obviously Dave left. I don't know what the business side of things was, but I know Dave was, I think he was moving away from the way the scene was going, and he wants to play more house music. So he went and formed the 051. Glenn's now the main resident and for the most part, the only MC who performed there. Obviously, you had your guests, you had your Majikas and, you know, MC Dread and this and that. So how did you end up being in the Drome?
Well, I remember, let me just grab a sweet, mate, because my throat's killing me here. I haven't spoken so much in.
I do apologise, mate.
I don't normally speak, you see, so just getting the cough sweet. I was playing in RJ's on a Sunday night. Excuse me, and Philly and Rusty came down with Paul Wells. Now I knew Paul from years ago because Paul and Bonner, who ran the Drome, used to also run clubs up in North Wales called Bentley's. So I knew Paul for a long time, and I knew Rusty's brother, Mark. He used to come into Atmosphere, a club I worked at. So it's kind of, I didn't know Phil, and they just came over and said, "Would you be interested in coming and playing at the Drome?" And I said, "Well, I haven't been since it's been a rave. I've been into the Drome when it was a fun pub,
Hamilton's."
Yeah. No, it was actually the Pleasuredrome then. Before when it was Hamilton's, it was more of I think it was a cabaret venue. Anyway, I'd not been, so I just said to him, "Look, well, I'm still flying all over the place here. I'm doing gigs away. I'd started doing a lot in Ireland, still doing stuff in Europe, and then obviously whenever one of these manufacturers said we've got a trade show on, can you come and help out? I do a lot of that stuff." So I said to them, "I'm interested, but that has to be taken into the consideration."
Yeah.
So I went, I think it was the following Saturday, I just went in to have a look at the place and see what what was making it tick. And it was a bit weird because it was still like the original rave. So it was glow sticks and bobble hats and stuff. So it seemed a little bit dated. And musically was a bit kind of dated, but it was still working. It worked, whether it was kind of out of fashion or not, it worked. So I just thought, well, that's great, but it means that I'm going to have to play this type of music for a little while and then just transition into something, because it's obviously we're coming to the end of this kind of style.
It needs to progress. It needs to evolve.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah, Dave had gone and they wanted to do, you know, get away from the ravey side of it and well, I'd say a bit more sophisticated, to be fair, originally, and that's what he did.
Yeah. So where were you? We had this conversation when we were in Club 051 last week.
Oh.
You were very much at the forefront. Obviously, there was people like X-Ray in Northern Ireland and maybe M-Zone to a degree as well. They were playing this harder trance side of things. But again, from a Merseyside point of view, there's tunes to this day that we still call Trix tunes, and obviously you weren't involved in the production of these tunes, but we still class them as Trix tunes. So where were you getting your music from, and what was the influence to go down that? You can call it European techno, hard trance, whatever you want to call it, but that progressive sound. Where was your inspiration from for that?
I'd obviously done quite a bit of stuff in Europe, and I'd seen what the dance scene was over there like, and it seemed to have this sound where it was pretty heavy music, but it had a little bit of a commercial tinge to it. So you could play this stuff, and it was heavy techno, trance, whatever you want to call it. But if you were Joe Bloggs and you came in the club, it didn't scare you too much.
Yeah.
It had a nice melody. I like music with melodies in. And I just thought, I don't want to go down a full-on techno kind of route. I don't think there's much life in that, in a venue of that size anyway. It wasn't that intimate. It was a big old place. And it was just a natural thing that happened. But buying that music, it was Dave Ralph used to serve me at 3Beat. I got to know the guys at 3Beat when they were in Quiggins. They were literally just some trestle tables and boxes of records. And I was very proud to do the opening of their first shop when they actually took on, I think it was Wood Street shop.
Yeah.
I did a little demo in there for them. And they were the record shop in Liverpool. There's been other record shops, but as far as I'm concerned, it was 3Beat was the main one. And Dave Ralph just knew me inside and out. And we'd go on a Saturday morning record shopping, and Dave would give me a pile of records, and there was some private booths in the back office that we could go and listen to the music. And I very, very rarely refused any of the records he gave me. He'd always hit the nail on the head with a huge big pile of music. So it was Dave Ralph that kind of knew. Steve Parry followed him and was not far off, but I think Steve Parry was definitely Dave's protege in a lot of respects. He's
Did Dave go on to open Unity Records? Is that right?
Yeah, Dave worked at Unity as well. They all kind of bounced around, but the one that really, if I was buying records, it would more than likely be 3Beat.
Yeah, so your time in the Drome, obviously you're still back and forwards to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Funny story, actually, the first time I ever came to the Drome, I thought it was October 93. I've been since corrected, it was September 93. Yeah. And I couldn't believe it. I'd come into some money on a Saturday night, I'd finished work, and I get on my mountain bike, goes to my mates, where are you going tonight? I said, we're going to the Drome. I said, oh God, I couldn't wait to see Trix. I was all excited. And I got there and fucking Lauren Garnier was on. You were somewhere else. I was fuming. However, it was a fantastic night. And Lauren Garnier was an absolute legend. So when you're playing in the Drome, did you have a lot of influence in the artists and the DJs that were getting booked? Because obviously it was all kind of theme related. You have Mario de Bellasson and these, like West Bam and DJ Dick and Merseyside and all these artists. Were you involved in the booking of them?
No, it was Paul Wells that did all the booking. So if there was DJs on, it was Paul that did that. We'd obviously pick out tracks that we were playing. So I was playing West Bam, Celebration Generation. So it was like, well, let's book West Bam. And the same with Ultrasonic. We were playing the 9/8 in rhythm, and it was do they do a show? Well, let's get them in.
Do they do a show? My God.
That's an
understatement, isn't it?
That was it especially with the Scottish guys. All of them. There was Ultrasonic, Chill FM,
Ultimate Buzz, Casio Brothers, QTech, SpaceX.
They did varying degrees of shows, but it was great fun, and people enjoyed it. It was exciting, especially Chill FM. They had that blooming electric chair, and
Jesus Christ,
it was
Red
nuts.
West is dead and all that.
Yeah, it was a nuts time, but it entertained people, and it worked. So I didn't have influences such as what was actually going on, but I'd suggest this record's huge. Yeah. If there's a DJ or a group performing on behalf of it or for it, let's get them in.
Yeah, because I remember they had one of the nights I went with Frankfurt Records.
Yeah,
and I remember thinking at the time, like, I didn't know who Bonner was. I just knew he was obviously looked like a bit of a gangster, if I'm honest. He ran the club. I thought he probably doesn't know who the fucking JN are and fucking Frankfurt Records. So I thought it must have been someone like you that was involved. And obviously,
it was Paul Wells. Paul Wells really got into it, and obviously, eventually, Paul went and started up Ultimatum for Carl Cox, which was a DJ agency. So he moved down to Brighton, where Carl was. I think he lived at Carl's place for a while, and it was still Paul that was booking all of these, and he was like the agent for them, but also making suggestions. I mean, there was times where he'd suggest somebody that wasn't particularly perfect for the Drome. There was a few in there, but
Strike were on the same night as Ultimate Buzz.
That was
a head scratcher for me. Strike should have gone down the road to the state.
Yeah. Well, that was actually the owners. the strike worked in the state. You know,
of course they would, yeah.
And they came over to the Drome and
got booed off the stage. I was there.
Not they
On the
weren't
same night as Ultimate Buzz. I mean, Jesus Christ, you couldn't get more of a compliment, a contrast, could you?
Yeah, well, yeah.
So at the same time you were moving musically and changing direction, Philly kind of came along with you because he started. Yep. He was playing with Rusty and he was playing the piano stuff and the happier stuff, and then he went down, like a Little Bird and stuff like that in the Utah Saints. But then he ended up kind of being, and I've said this in a nice way. I think Philly was one of the most underrated DJs in there because when he was there with Rusty, he was part of Double Impact, which I think Sinai came up with that name, didn't he? He was part of Double Impact, and it was just like a double team. And then when he was with you, because of your skill set and the profile that you had, I don't think Philly got the credit he deserved. Philly was an amazing DJ. The Trix and Philly tapes, we'll go on to tapes in a minute. Yeah. The Trix and Philly tapes, everyone just, oh yeah, put the Trix one on, put the Trix one on. And looking back now with fresh ears, the Philly tide was just as good. Yeah.
We used to go record shopping together, and it was a bit nuts because we very rarely bought the same music, and even though we were getting offered the same stuff, there was obviously some tracks that we'd both buy, but we also had a thing that if one of us had played it at the Drome first, then the other one wouldn't.
Track,
yeah, it was kind of like that. But I mean, there was tracks that Phil played that I'd play out elsewhere. It wasn't like you can't play it again.
Yeah.
It was just out of respect for each other. But we kind of complemented each other.
Definitely.
He was kind of like the techno we want, and I was always into kind of Zoom. Let's take people up and get them going nuts. But you can't do that all night.
Yeah.
The people be knackered if you just kept on giving them anthem after anthem. Yeah. So it was really cool when Phil had come on. In fact, one of the nicest nights would be when it was just me and Phil playing, and we really got into it. We didn't have guests on to stop and start our night.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed those. There wasn't that many of them. We'd always have something on.
Yeah.
But a night when it was just me and Phil playing was one of the things that I enjoyed the most.
Yeah. So we've mentioned tapes there. I mean, I'm probably responsible for looking around your flat there. I think I'm responsible for probably half your fucking furniture there. I spent a fortune on your tapes back in the day. There was the Trix and Philly tapes, obviously. There was the Drome tapes. There was the Northern Ireland tapes. You must have made a few quid off them back in the day.
Yeah.
So were you involved in the production of them, or would you just record a master and send it to someone? Or distribution?
We just have a DAT machine, record. Me and Phil used to do it. I'd record my side. He'd do his mix on the same DAT. We send it off. There was a place up in Bredbury near Manchester, or near Stockport, sorry. And they used to reel off the tapes for us. I used to go up and pick the tape up, and we'd bring them back and flog them.
Yeah. So how did you end up getting so well revered in Northern Ireland? Obviously, you were going to Northern Ireland before you were in the Drome.
Yeah.
They've still got a massive fan base over there. Yeah. How did that kind of start off?
I met Robbie Nelson.
He was massive in Northern Ireland, wasn't he?
Yeah. So Robbie was in the DMC competitions, and he came to a regional heat in Warrington at Mr. Smith's because he was from the north. It was like that was the regional one, so he came over. And I just got to know him. And then obviously when I became the European champ, he thought this would be a cool act to put on in a club over here. So he booked me, and I played. The first place I played was the Ulster Hall in 1990. And then I did another place in, I think it was Enniskillen, just doing scratch mixing demos. And that was it. And then a while later, Robbie rang me up again and just said, I've heard you're playing dance music, rave music. And I said, yeah, do you want to book me for that? And he did. And I think the first club I did over there was right in at the deep end. There's a place called Circus.
Wow.
And Circus was, I don't know whether it was legal or not. I mean, we're talking the 90s, so the Troubles were really kind of active over in Ireland. And this was an all-nighter. And all the legitimate clubs in Northern Ireland were closing at 12, 1 o'clock at that time, and this place opened at 10. It was basically a pool hall So if you came to Circus, you got a membership to play pool.
Yeah,
There was a
like
pool
a traditional
table.
club, isn't it?
There was a pool table in there, but most people were stood on it. It was just a big rave, basically, and ran by one side or the other kind of thing.
Yeah. So when did you actually leave the Drome? Because it seemed to kind of you didn't leave, you kind of fizzled out. If that you were back and forth a little bit. How did that come about?
Yeah, I'd started doing different types of work with manufacturers of equipment, and I was getting a bit. I think it had done it. It had done what I was there to do. You know, it was time for me to kind of move on and get some fresh people in there and do something different. And they started introducing some of the kind of like the happy hardcore stuff, which wasn't my cup of tea as well. And also at that time, it was because they weren't venues. People kind of labelled the club with that, and it was a bit of a death wish for some clubs where if you put happy hardcore on, it was very hard to go back.
Yeah,
and be kind of known or recognised for playing house music or something a bit different. So I kind of moved on. I went and did a bit for the 051, but at that time my passion was moving into helping design DJ equipment. It's just something I kind of.
So the transition for you then between vinyl and digital, I imagine would have been quite an easy one, because I remember seeing it. I think it was one of the Drome reunions, and you had a Vestax V380, was it?
Yeah, VCR.
That was your controller. So did you find the transition quite easy to go from vinyl to digital?
I obviously initially jumped onto DVS, which is where you're still using vinyl, but you're using vinyl records.
Time-coded vinyl.
Time-coded vinyl. So you're controlling a piece of software from traditional turntables, which is what most of the scratch guys use these days anyway. And then Vestax brought out a thing called a VCI 300, and it was the first ever Serato DJ controller. Yeah. Well, I seen that, and at the time I obviously was friends with Vestax, but I wasn't working with them directly. And I was hooked on this thing. I just thought what a perfect scenario. You know, you got this tiny little thing in a laptop, and you can do everything more than what you can do on vinyl with it. I eventually ended up running the European office for Vestax, and was integral on the change of the VCI series.
Yeah,
I was. It's not hard. I don't have any passion for records or anything like that. It's just the music that's on them. It's not the format that counted for me. It was more the fact that as long as I've got that music and I can manipulate it somehow.
Yeah, I think when I had the VCI 300, I took a break from DJing, like commercially, if you like, and I was just, I'd buy some stuff and it'd go under the couch, and then I'd end up selling it and I'd buy some. Anyway, I had a VCI 300, but you could buy an external unit to go next to it. Because, say again.
It's VFX1.
That's right, yeah, because it was quite basic, and then obviously the 380 came out, and it was like it was integrated into it then, wasn't it? And then you had the 400 as well.
Yeah, well, the VCI 300, when it first came out, that was the feature set in Serato Itch. So there was the two pieces of software at the time. There was Itch and Scratch, and there wasn't effects in Itch at the time. So obviously there was no effects on the 300. As soon as they integrated effects into their software, we had to either add an effects unit within a new unit, or we can have an additional one. And we decided to make the additional unit. The VFX1 could be used with any unit. It was just controlled the effects within Serato Itch. So it was sold to anybody. So you could be buying a different brand of controller and use the VFX1 to it. And it was just a pure MIDI controller as well. So it could be
MIDI mappable. So you could have it
map to anything.
So am I right in saying you took a bit of a hiatus, shall we say, from the DJing scene? Is that right?
Well, I got married and I was having children, and there was just a few things. You know, it didn't feel right going out to nightclubs.
Yeah.
And then and missing things with my children. I missed my son's second birthday by about an hour trying to get back from Tokyo. So it was these kind of things that I just thought, you know what, I've had a laugh.
Yeah.
I can still do some DJ gigs. I'm not stopping, but I'm going to be a bit more selective and work around it and try and do more with my children.
Yeah, and then obviously the old school resurgence. So obviously, Reminisce, for those who don't know, is predominantly run by Steve Cockey, and he's the main guy. Were you involved with? Because I don't think the first one was only like 1 or 2 attempts, wasn't it? Which Reminisce did you first get involved in?
I can't remember. It wasn't. It was after a couple of them they did that I got involved, but everybody In Demand there's not many of them I don't know. You know, is the Steve, but like Christian Davis, who's the technical guy, he was our tech support at Vestax. I used to live at his house when I was up in North Wales. Andy Christian. I mean, there's every single person that works in there are my friends. So for quite a while now, I've treated DJ gigs as if my friends are involved or running it, or DJs are on that are mates of mine, I'll do the gig. If it's just Joe Bloggs ringing up, want me to go and do a club event, I'm not going to it, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate now that I can pick and choose and do gigs that are more like a busman's holiday, where I'm going, meeting my friends, having a laugh,
and coming pay for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't seen the Mallorca Lee podcast, you touched on a subject there, which quite an interesting topic. You were diagnosed with mild form of autism quite late in life. For those who haven't seen the podcast, can you explain how that came about?
I've always felt a bit odd, you know, when I'm not the most sociable person when I'm out there, and just various things that affected me over life. And one of my children got diagnosed on the autistic spectrum when they were 2 years old, and at the time, his mother and me were obviously we didn't know much about autism. We honest to God thought the poor kids in the special bus kind of rocking backwards and forwards, which, you know, a lot of them are.
Yeah.
We thought, oh, is this what's happening to our son? So we started looking into it, as you do as a parent, and I was reading through all of this stuff and thinking, well, everybody does that, and, you know, not liking being in public places and all the rest of it. These are all things that everybody likes. What's so wrong with that? And then it kind of dawned on me that it was, well, no, I do that, and I don't, and it wasn't for everybody else. But as you can imagine, we just had our child diagnosed. I wasn't just going to ping up and say, oh, I think I am as well.
Me as well, yeah.
So I kind of just left it for a while. And when I got a bit older, I decided, you know what, these things are affecting me. They have affected me. I got divorced, and it's definitely part and parcel of that. And I decided to look into it and see if I was, you know, and maybe that would help. I think you'll find an awful lot of people nowadays are getting diagnosed with it because it obviously, I think most people know autism being a spectrum, whereas you've got people that are quite profoundly affected by this, and people like myself, which are known as high functioning, where you can deal with life, but there's certain traits that still kind of can, you know, affect how you see the world and how you deal with the world.
Yeah.
And so, but it's a real help for me with some things.
I was going to say, it must have been a relief to find out, like, obviously you've said yourself, these little tweaks, these little kinks that you think, you know, why am I doing that and no one else is and stuff. And it must have been a relief to find out, actually, this is a thing now, and that's why I do what I do and why I react the way I do.
Yeah, it helps a lot of people. It didn't help me initially, because I deep down I knew, but when I got the diagnosis, then whereas years ago I might be waiting in a queue in Greg's to get a pasty, and I'd be kind of quite nervous at the whole, how do I deal with this? I know it might sound odd to some people, but just dealing with any interaction was kind of quite exhausting. And because I've been diagnosed with it, it actually became something where I was thinking, when I go in, this is going to happen now.
Yeah.
And and I know why. And it didn't really help me at first. It was more a case of I was thinking too much about it, whereas before I was oblivious that I had this thing.
Yeah.
But over time, I've realised that it's I just see things differently. In some respects, better. I know that DJing is quite a liberating thing for me. I have auditory processing issues, which is another thing that an awful lot of the traits of autism I have is basically social interaction, auditory, and I like routine. I don't like breaking routine. So the auditory issues are, I find it hard to concentrate on something, especially if I'm tired or stressed. So I could be in a room and somebody's talking to me, but I can hear the fridge buzzing in the corner.
I think I've got a bit of that myself, mate.
but I hear it all at once, and I find it hard to then concentrate on the person. Whereas everyone else I can hear the fridge, but I'm not listening to it.
Yeah.
So when I DJ'd, it was so liberating, because at that, then obviously I've got complete and utter control over every parameter of the music. So it was a place I wallowed in, It's lovely.
And come on.
I just then I didn't have to kind of worry about anything. I knew what the sound was going to do because I had control over it. Whereas in the real world, so to speak, whatever noise was happening, it was kind of like, okay, sometimes I could deal with it. Sometimes it was just so overwhelming, and I just headphones on. And it's more likely when you see an awful lot of autistic people with headphones or ear defenders, it's just a bit too much.
Yeah. It's funny because you said about DJing there being quite liberating. Obviously, I've not got to the heights that you've got to, but I find it strangely calming when you're on stage, because it's the only time. Like I've got little kids, I've got a missus, I've got a full-time job, I've got a dog. When you're on stage, you just get left alone. And as you said, you're in control. You know what's you said it best on Malorca Lee's podcast. You said it's like looking into the future, because you'll load the sack up and you'll go, "Ooh, I know what's going to happen now when this drops."
I was going to say that's the power that DJs have. That once they harness that, that's where you've got a really good DJ. Is the ones knowing the future. I know it sounds nuts when you can say know in the future, but when you know the next track and the next track after that, and if you're getting excited about, if you can read the crowd and when I play this, they're going to do that, and when I play this one after it, they're going to go nuts or whatever. That's quite a powerful thing to have. And when you can harness that and you know your music and you can read crowds well enough, that's where you get these DJs that you kind of think that, why are they so different? Why are they so? It's because they're looking at the crowd and they're seeing what's happening, and they, taking control and really taking people on a bit of a journey.
There was a quote recently, and I can't remember who it was, so I can't take any credit for this, but it said, "A good DJ plays the music that people love. A great DJ plays the tracks they don't know they love yet." Yeah. And that's where the likes of you and Philly came in, because as you've alluded to before, you had a bit of a transitional period there where you had to play the stuff that they liked, but you also had to introduce this new stuff. And over the period of 12, 18 months, it had transformed, and you'd throw the odd one in now and again. You'd throw a Panic in, or a Bamachi, or a hardcore disco. But most of your sets were predominantly stuff that 12, 18 months ago we'd never heard before. Yeah. And that's testament to you and Philly, listening to new music and taking in direction. So we're going to talk very briefly before we wrap up. You can see it behind me there, guys. This Saturday in Club 051, it's the ultimate Drome reunion. You've been involved in quite a number of Drome reunions and Drome theme nights, but never have we had a lineup like this. I'll put the flyer up on screen now so you're not going to see my ugly mug. The flyer's going to go up there. You can see the lineup. It's sensational. After all these years, Mike, obviously you've played loads of clubs over the years. Have you still got an affinity to the Drome? Do you still find that there's is it a special venue to you still?
What's special, I think, is the fact that, like you say, we've done a lot of these reunions, and there's this crowd of people that just keep coming to them, and it's nuts because the demographic of them, these people are around my age, and younger, obviously. And you think Saturday night, going out on a Saturday night is hard work for somebody of my age. So the fact that these people have this love and passion for the place is the thing that I kind of thrive off. I find it difficult when I meet a lot of people, because they're all, they're not obsessed with it, but it's something that was special to them. And I know that as you're growing up, there's always times in your life that you remember fondly because of something. Like I said, I look back with a lot of fondness to my time playing with BMX bikes and my friends. It was an amazing time. And I know that, especially when there's music involved, it can get quite emotional for people.
Yeah.
And I know there's people out there that met their wives and girlfriends and on nights out there, or after parties after it or whatever. So it's all of these places, however big or small, will be special to some people out there. And I feel quite proud that, that I was involved in it. And the people who I work with, Phil was one of those. And it's
I know we're doing something special for Phil. So how this came about, obviously, when the 051 reopened, and Steve Cocky came to me and said, we're thinking of doing a drone night. What are your thoughts? I said, well, yeah, I think there's definitely a market for it. It's still, I still play a lot of drone stuff on my radio show every week. And when I do a drone special or a Trix special or a Dave Graham special, the listeners always go up because people still hold it in very high regard. I said, the key to doing a drone night is, it's okay having a drone night and having Trix and Cyanide on and then having, Joe Bloggs and all his mates. I said, but if you can get a full lineup, he said, well, what do you suggest? I said, well, ideally, Dave Graham. I said, your Trix and Cyanide is a given. That's a must. You've got to have Trix and Cyanide on. I said, if you can get Dave Graham on, and then, Carl Cox is probably out of our league now, financial wise. Ultrasonic sadly passed away. Philly sadly passed away. Stu Allen sadly passed away. I said, but if you can get like Westbam on, or Q-Tex, or Chill FM, or something like that, and they've gone the whole hog. We've got 3 PAs, Awesome 3, Ultimate Buzz, Dream Frequency, yourself, Cyanide, Westbam, Dave Graham's coming out of retirement to play a drum set as well. I think it's going to be a very, very special night indeed. And I for one, I'm looking forward to it. It's this Saturday, guys. Anyway, you get your tickets. I'll put the link at the bottom of the screen. So we're going to wrap up now, Mike, with a couple of quick fire questions. Let me get my earphone in there.
Okay.
You don't look so nervous. It's not.
I'm waiting for. Yeah, I'm just waiting for white fronts or boxer shorts.
Well, I'll cross that one off.
Good.
DJ Trikk, I will take your first answer and your first answer only.
God.
Tea or coffee?
Depends on what time of day, I suppose. Coffee in the morning, and then it's just tea. Lots of tea.
Alive or dead? Who would you like to go and watch in concert?
Oh, James Brown.
What would you say your worst habit is?
I really don't know. Answer that one.
If you walk into a fully stocked shop, what would be your go-to chocolate bar?
Oh, crumbs. Wagon wheels.
What superpower would you have?
Invisible. I'd like to be invisible.
Spitting Image or the Young Ones?
Both. I can't.
80s or 90s?
80s.
Sega or Nintendo?
Neither. I wasn't never into gaming machines at all. My son will hate me for that, but no.
Well, for him, it'd be Xbox or PlayStation, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Rocky 3 or Rocky 4?
No, again, not. And I don't like violence.
No. One thing you would rid from the world?
Racism.
Favorite swear word or insult?
Gobshite.
I say that when I'm driving. Yeah. Bath or shower?
Shower.
A full English or a roast dinner?
Again, I'd have the full English in the morning and the rest.
What would be your first purchase if you won the Euro Millions?
I think I'd buy my children a house each.
Puppies or kittens?
Puppies, hate cats.
And what's the best podcast you've ever been on?
This one.
Hey, top answer. Right, Mike. Anyone you want to give a shout out or a mention to?
Looking forward to making Glenn dance on Saturday. Yeah.
So, for what apart from the drum revival this Saturday, what else have you got lined up?
A few things over Christmas. Going back over to Ireland, and I've got some in the new year over there. I don't do that many gigs nowadays. Like I say, I've just cherry picked the really good ones. So
we haven't touched on this. If you don't mind, just give a quick chat now. So you've got a new project, a new career, if you like, which is gardening. How did that come about?
Well, that's not new. I've done it for most of my life, and I've just bounced between the two. So when I was young, I'd garden, and then go work in clubs at weekends, and then whenever one's been doing better than the other, I've jumped ship, so whenever I wasn't DJing much, I'd garden.
Yeah.
And then if the DJing or the music technology stuff came up, gardening was always like my fallback. And I decided when I turned 50 that I would concentrate more on gardening work and doing the DJing as the fun, because I prefer having a steady income and having fun money coming in instead of the alternate.
Yeah.
So I'm a head gardener at Chester Racecourse. So
wow, you've done some work for Dave Graham as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Dave's got a big garden. Which is lovely. He's got a 50-meter long lavender hedge, and it's kind of like the most relaxing day ever when you when you cut the lavender hedge. Yeah.
It's such a juxtaposition from being on stage in front of potentially thousands of people to being in a garden with just a over the lawnmower.
The guys in work find it quite funny because they listen to in-demand radio and they're constantly hearing my name getting called out and this, that, the other. And they turn around and they see me there digging holes or weeding.
It's not the same person, surely. You've made a mistake here.
So I invited one of the young girls who works for the cleaners along to Reminisce for the last couple of years, just so they can come and have a skip around. And I keep myself to myself in work. I don't tell too many people about that.
Glenn said that because obviously Glenn does a lot of mountain climbing and walking and stuff. And he said, every now and again, they'll be up a mountain somewhere and someone will whip out the tape and say, oh, put this on. He's like, So listen, Mike, thank you so much for doing this. As I said, this has been a long time in the making. We got there, we've done it. I can't wait for Saturday. I'm looking forward to your set. I've got to watch your set very keenly because I need to see what you're going to play. So I don't have to play it when I'm on after you. Thank you so much for doing this, Mike. Don't forget, guys, get yourself subscribed. 40 plus episodes to watch back on. Loads of legends in the scene. Plenty more coming up. And I'll see you on the next one. Take care, guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.